handcuffs clicked shut with a sound that didn't belong in this neighborhood. Cold steel against warm skin. Too tight. Too final. General Maya Sterling didn't flinch, but she felt the weight of it settling into her wrists, into the silence of the tree-lined street, into the stunned pause that followed. Somewhere behind her, a tablet propped against a flower pot kept recording. Faces stared back at her from the screen. Mothers. Fathers. Framed photographs of sons and daughters in uniform. Gold Star families. "This is unbelievable," a woman's voice crackled through the speaker. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Maya kept her eyes forward. "Please stay with me," she said calmly. "Do not turn this off." The officer in front of her let out a short laugh. "You should have thought about that before you decided to talk back." Talk back. Those words hung in the air like a verdict already decided. "I am standing on my own property," Maya said evenly. "I have not committed a crime. You have no probable cause to detain me." Officer Derek Vance adjusted his grip on her arm, tightening it just enough to send a message. "See that right there? That attitude. You people always think you know the law." Maya's jaw tightened, but her voice didn't rise. Years of command had trained her better than that. "The Fourth Amendment isn't an attitude," she replied. "It's the Constitution." Behind the officer, another patrol car idled. Red and blue lights bounced off manicured hedges and historic brick facades, turning Buckhead into something unrecognizable. Curtains across the street twitched. A garage door across the way paused halfway open, then slowly lowered again. Officer Vance glanced at her clothes and smirked. Dirt under her fingernails, a faded t-shirt, gardening gloves still tucked into her back pocket. "You live here," he said loud enough for the quiet street to hear. "In this place, dressed like that?" "Yes," Maya answered. "I don't buy it." On the tablet, a man with silver hair leaned closer to his camera. His voice shook with restrained anger. "My son died in Kandahar," he said. "Who are you to put your hands on her during a memorial?" Vance shot a look at the screen and scoffed. "Turn that thing off." "No," Maya said. Firmer now, but still controlled. "They have the right to witness this." "That's enough," he snapped. "You're being detained for obstruction." "For speaking," Maya asked quietly. "For not knowing when to shut up." The words landed harder than the cuffs. Maya inhaled slowly through her nose, counting the breath the way she had taught soldiers to do under fire. She knew the statistics. She knew how fast a situation like this could turn. A wrong movement, a misunderstood gesture, a headline written after the fact. She also knew something else. Her heart rate had spiked. She felt it before she thought about it, a deep, steady thudding in her chest, louder than the cruiser engine, louder than the cicadas buzzing in the summer heat. The officer didn't notice. He was too busy proving a point. "You think wearing a calm face makes you special," Vance said. "Out here, I'm in charge." Maya stared straight ahead. Power doesn't need to announce itself. That earned her another shove. On the screen, a woman began to cry. "Please," she said, "this ceremony is all we have left." Maya swallowed. For just a second, her composure wavered, not from fear, but from the insult of it all. The desecration. The casual way authority had stepped over sacrifice. "This is not about you," Maya said to the officer. "And it's not about me. It's about dignity." "Save it for the judge," Vance replied. The tablet chimed softly, a biometric alert. Maya felt the subtle vibration against her hip, The one almost no one ever noticed. Immobilization, elevated heart rate, confirmed distress. Somewhere far beyond Buckhead systems were waking up. She did not smile. "Are you threatening me now?" Vance asked, misreading her silence. "No," Maya said. "I'm reminding you to slow down." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You should have stayed quiet. You should have known your place." Across the street, a front door opened fully now. An older man stepped onto his porch, hands raised, phone recording. A woman joined him. Then another neighbor. The scene was changing piece by piece like a tide turning. On the tablet, one of the Gold Star mothers straightened her shoulders. "My daughter wore a uniform," she said, her voice steady through tears. "She swore an oath. You are breaking it." For the first time, something flickered across Vance's face. Uncertainty, quickly buried under irritation. "I said, turn it off," he barked again. Maya turned her head just enough to meet his eyes. "You already made a choice," she said. "Now you're going to live with it." The street fell quiet. No sirens yet. No shouting. Just the soft hum of electronics and the weight of witnesses, digital and human alike. Maya stood there, hands cuffed behind her back, dirt still on her palms, surrounded by a neighborhood that had assumed she belonged somewhere else. She thought of soldiers who had stood straighter under worse circumstances. She thought of how power reveals itself not in comfort, but in pressure. And she waited. Because sometimes the most dangerous moment for unjust authority is the one where it believes nothing is coming next. The first thing that changed was the sound. Not sirens. Not yet. Just a low, unfamiliar hum, rolling through the street, subtle enough that most people wouldn't notice it if they weren't already paying attention. The kind of sound that didn't belong to a single vehicle. It belonged to something larger. Coordinated. General Maya Sterling felt it before she saw anything. Her pulse, which she had worked to steady, surged again this time, not from fear, but from recognition. Years in command had trained her body to read patterns faster than her conscious mind could label them. The biometric alert against her hip vibrated once more, firmer this time. Confirmation. Escalation. Officer Derek Vance didn't notice. He was still riding the momentum of authority, still convinced this was just another suburban stop that would end with paperwork and a story to tell later. "Turn around," he said, tugging at the cuffs as if to reposition her. "You're not standing like you're supposed to." Maya didn't resist. She didn't comply either. She stood exactly as she was. "You're making this worse for yourself," Vance muttered. "No," she replied. "You already did that." Across the street, more doors had opened. Neighbors stepped onto porches, phones raised openly now. No more hiding behind curtains. Something in the air had shifted, and even they could feel it. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was an event. The tablet in the garden chimed again. A Gold Star father spoke quietly, as if afraid to break something fragile. "Ma'am," he said, "we're still with you." Maya nodded, once a small movement he could see through the screen. "Thank you," she said. "Whatever happens next, stay recording." Officer Vance scoffed. "You think a video scares me?" Before Maya could answer, the radio on Vance's shoulder crackled to life. Not dispatch. Not the familiar cadence of local traffic calls. Static, then silence. Vance frowned and tapped the device. "Dispatch, repeat." Nothing. He tried again, louder this time. "Dispatch, I'm on scene at the radio," cut out mid-sentence. From the far end of the street, a vehicle appeared. Black, large, unmarked. It moved slowly, deliberately, as if speed were unnecessary. Then another followed, and another. One of the neighbors whispered, "What is that?" Vance turned, irritation flashing across his face. "Everyone stay back. This is a police matter." The first SUV stopped 50 yards away. The engine didn't shut off. Neither did the next, or the one behind it. They lined the street with military precision, spacing exact angles intentional. Maya closed her eyes briefly. Level 1. Extraction. The realization hit Vance a second too late. More vehicles turned onto the street. Not lights and sirens, just presence. Weight. Authority that didn't need to announce itself. Blacked out Suburbans. Government plates, indistinguishable by design. Then vehicles marked clearly enough that even civilians recognized the lettering. FBI. GBI. A man in a dark jacket stepped out of the lead vehicle. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush. He walked forward as if the street already belonged to him. Officer Vance straightened instinctively. "Hey, this is an active detention. You need to clear the area." The man stopped a few feet away, eyes moving briefly to Maya's cuffs, then back to Vance. "Officer," he said evenly, "step away from her." Vance bristled. "Under what authority?" "Federal," the man replied. He glanced to his side as another agent joined him, then another. And joint. The neighborhood had gone silent. Even the cicadas seemed to pause. Maya remained still, hands cuffed behind her back, face composed. She did not look at the agents. She did not need to. "Ma'am," the agent said, turning toward her, now voice respectful. "Can you confirm your identity for the record?" Officer Vance's mouth opened slightly. "Wait, General Maya Sterling," she said calmly. "Commander Cyber Command and Global Logistics." The words landed like a physical force. One of the neighbors gasped. Someone across the street lowered their phone in disbelief. On the tablet screen, a gold star mother covered her mouth with both hands. The agent nodded once. "General, we have your signal." Only then did Vance step back. His face drained of color, replaced by something close to panic. This doesn't make sense," he said. She didn't identify herself. Maya turned her head, just enough to look at him. "You never asked." Another agent approached and crouched slightly to examine the cuffs. His jaw tightened. "How long has she been restrained?" Vance hesitated. "She was obstructing, remove them," the agent said. Maya spoke before the cuffs were unlocked. "Not yet." Every head turned toward her. "Leave them on," she continued. "For now." The agent hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Vance stared at her. "Why would you?" "Because I want this exactly as it is," Maya said. "Document it." The lead agent turned slightly, speaking into his sleeve. "Secure the perimeter. No weapons drawn. Keep this calm." The professionalism was unmistakable. No shouting. No posturing. Just control. More neighbors stepped forward, emboldened now. The gardener they had barely noticed days earlier was being addressed with a title most of them had only heard on the news. One woman whispered, "They handcuffed a general." Maya finally allowed herself a slow breath. She looked around, not with anger, but with clarity. At the historic homes. The patrol car still idling uselessly. The officer who had mistaken silence for submission. "This is not a show of force," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is a correction." The agent nodded. "We're prepared to escort you, General." "In a moment," Maya replied. Her eyes returned to Vance. You believed you were in charge because no one stopped you. Vance swallowed hard. I was just doing my job. No, Maya said. You were exercising unchecked power. The tablet chimed softly again. A Gold Star father spoke through tears. Thank you, he said, for letting us see this. Maya met the screen with steady eyes. This isn't for me, she said. It's for everyone who didn't have a convoy waiting. The cuffs were unlocked at last. The metal fell away clinking softly as an agent caught them before they hit the ground. Maya flexed her wrists once slowly. No rush. No dramatics. The street remained quiet as she took her first step forward, not toward the vehicles, but toward accountability that had already begun to unfold. The reckoning had arrived. And it didn't need sirens to announce itself. They did not take General Maya Sterling away that night. Instead, the street was sealed. Yellow tape went up quietly. Federal authority replaced local command without ceremony. The patrol cars that had arrived with confidence now sat inert, boxed in by vehicles that answered to a different chain of command. Neighbors were escorted back to their homes with polite firmness. Phones were still recording, but now the story had moved beyond what a lens could capture. Maya stood beneath the shade of her own trees, hands-free now, posture unchanged. An FBI agent approached with a tablet of his own, the screen already alive with cascading lines of data. Ma'am, he said, with your authorization, we can initiate a full digital preservation. You already have it, Maya replied. Begin with their internal systems, then expand outward. That single sentence shifted the center of gravity. Within minutes, the police department's network was frozen. Not metaphorically, literally. Financial accounts flagged, evidence lockers logged, servers isolated from the outside world. What had once been a municipal institution was now a secure digital crime scene. Inside a mobile command unit parked just beyond the cul-de-sac, analysts moved with practiced speed. No shouting, no panic, just the sound of keyboards and low voices exchanging confirmations. Asset forfeiture records are extensive, one analyst said. Years' worth. Pull all of it, Maya responded, stepping inside the unit. No filters. No assumptions. She watched the data populate in real time. Names, addresses, dollar amounts seized under the thin veil of probable cause. Patterns emerged almost immediately. Zip codes. The analyst hesitated. Ma'am, these targets aren't random. They never are, Maya said. The system had been marketed as efficiency, predictive policing, AI-driven threat assessment. On paper, it promised safety. In practice, it had learned something else entirely, how to hunt where resistance was least likely and profit was highest. Wealthy minority neighborhoods, homes with equity, families with savings, but limited political insulation. This software, an agent said, carefully was procured through a third-party vendor. Foreign-sourced, obfuscated code. Backdoors, Maya asked. Yes. She nodded once. So they weren't just over-policing. They were being used. The room fell quiet. This was no longer about Officer Derek Vance or a single department. This was a racket technological financial systemic. A machine that rewarded confiscation and punished presence. And like all machines, it required people willing to look the other way. Maya leaned over the table, studying a list of names scrolling past. She stopped abruptly. There it was. Sterling Maya, Target designation non-compliant. High value. The analyst looked up, startled. Ma'am, we didn't. I know, Maya said softly. Leave it. For a moment, the weight of it pressed down on her. Not shock. Recognition. The system had done exactly what it was designed to do. It had flagged her, not because she was suspicious, but because she was visible and assumed vulnerable. Outside, the night deepened. News vans gathered. At the edge of the perimeter, reporters murmuring into microphones, trying to explain a situation that refused to fit into simple narratives. Inside the command unit, a second analyst spoke up. We're cross-referencing civil asset forfeiture cases with foreclosure records. A new screen lit up. A family of 4. Their home seized after a traffic stop that yielded nothing but cash intended for a medical procedure. A young man flagged repeatedly until his college fund was gone. A small business shuttered after repeated inspections triggered algorithmic suspicion. These people never knew why it kept happening, the analyst said. They just knew it wouldn't stop. Maya straightened. They knew, she said quietly. They just weren't believed. She requested a secure line and waited as it connected. This is General Sterling, she said, when the voice on the other end answered. I need temporary federal authority over the department's financial and digital infrastructure. There was a pause, then granted. With that, the city lost control of its own machinery. Accounts were frozen. Vendor contracts suspended. Data mirrors transmitted to federal oversight teams across multiple agencies. What had once been buried in bureaucracy was now exposed to light. Officer Vance sat alone in a cruiser at the edge of the scene, watching from a distance as his world rearranged itself without him. No one had arrested him yet. No one needed to. The truth was moving faster than handcuffs ever could. Maya exited the command unit and walked toward the police station, not as a captive, but as an examiner. Agents flanked her, not protectively, but procedurally. Inside the building, desks sat cluttered with the artifacts of routine. Coffee cups, family photos. A place that had once looked ordinary now felt charged with consequence. She stopped in front of a monitor still logged into the system. Who had clearance for these parameters, she asked. A supervisor lowered his eyes. More people than should have. Enough to know, Maya said. Not enough to stop it. She did not raise her voice. She did not accuse. She cataloged. Every word was measured, every instruction precise. This isn't about humiliation, she said to the room. It's about dismantling a structure that shouldn't exist. Outside word spread. Neighbors who had once whispered now spoke openly. Victims began to recognize their own stories in what was unfolding on the news. For the first time, the narrative wasn't controlled by press releases or internal affairs reports. It was controlled by data raw, undeniable, and damning. As midnight approached, an agent approached Maya with an update. Ma'am, we've confirmed distribution of this software to multiple departments nationwide. Maya absorbed that silently. Then this doesn't end here, she said. No, ma'am. She looked once more at the screen bearing her name. Not with anger, with resolve. This system counted on silence, she said. On people believing they were alone. She turned away from the monitor. Make sure they're not. The digital siege continued through the night. Quiet, relentless, irreversible. No sirens. No speeches. Just the methodical unraveling of a racket that had mistaken invisibility for immunity. By morning, the department would still be standing, but it would never operate the same way again. The courthouse was already full before sunrise. By the time General Maya Sterling arrived, every seat was taken. Reporters lined the walls with notebooks closed and phones silenced, as if instinctively aware that this was not a spectacle that benefited from noise. Families sat shoulder to shoulder on the wooden benches, people who had never met before, yet recognized one another immediately. They shared the same posture, the same quiet vigilance, the same history of being dismissed. This was not one case. It was 50. The clerk called the room to order. When the judge entered the room, rose and settled again with a collective breath, Maya took her seat at the plaintiff's table, not elevated, not separated. She had insisted on that. Today was not about rank. Across the aisle, Officer Derek Vance sat beside a public defender whose jaw tightened with each passing minute. Vance's uniform was gone. So was his certainty. He stared straight ahead, eyes fixed on a point just above the jury box, as if looking anywhere else might require him to see too much. The first exhibit was not a document. It was a video. The screen descended and the courtroom lights dimmed slightly. No dramatic introduction, no narration, just footage. The body cam activated with a faint electronic chime, a familiar angle, a familiar voice. The footage played silently. At first Maya, standing in her garden hands, visible posture, calm. Then the sound came through. You should have known your place. A murmur rippled through the gallery before the judge silenced it with a look. The video continued uninterrupted. The handcuffs, the tightening grip, the dismissal of her words, the moment where her voice remained steady while the authority confronting her did not. Then the split screen appeared. On the right side, another video began to play. The Gold Star Memorial live stream. A mother's face froze mid-sentence. A father's eyes widened in confusion. A voice asked, "Why are the police there?" The contrast was unbearable. 6 minutes. That was all it took. When the screen went dark, no one spoke. Not the prosecution. Not the defense. The silence itself felt like testimony. The prosecution called its first witness a middle-aged woman who approached the stand with measured steps. She clutched a folded piece of paper, but never unfolded it. "My name is Angela Morris," she said. "My house was taken." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She explained how her husband had been stopped for a broken taillight, how the cash they were carrying money saved for their son's surgery was seized, how the paperwork came faster than the explanation, how the appeals went unanswered. "I was never charged," she said, "but I was punished." One by one, others followed. A veteran who lost his small business after repeated algorithmic flags labeled him high risk. A college student whose tuition fund vanished into evidence lockers and never returned. A retired couple who moved in with relatives after foreclosure papers arrived without warning. Patterns emerged. The jury saw them before anyone had to point them out. Then General Maya Sterling was called. She stood, adjusted her jacket, and walked to the witness stand with the same composure she had shown on her front porch. She did not swear an oath loudly. She did not look at the cameras. When asked to explain the technology involved, she did not overwhelm the room. This software was designed to predict behavior, she said, but it was trained on biased data. It learned to associate value with vulnerability. That's not artificial intelligence. That's automated prejudice. She explained the back doors, the foreign sourcing, The way oversight had been replaced by convenience. She spoke plainly, as if addressing a room of neighbors rather than a court of law. And when I was flagged, she continued, it confirmed what many of these families already knew. The system does not correct itself. It escalates. The defense attempted to object. The judge overruled. The public defender rose slowly for cross-examination. His voice lacked aggression. He knew the ground beneath him was unstable. General Sterling, he began. Officer Vance was following department protocol. Maya met his gaze. Protocol does not absolve responsibility, she said. It distributes it. The defender hesitated, then asked the question he had been avoiding. Do you believe my client is solely responsible for what happened to you? No, Maya answered. But he is accountable. The word hung in the air, precise, unavoidable. The final witness was not a technical expert or a federal agent. It was a Gold Star mother. She approached the stand holding a photograph of her son in uniform. She didn't ask permission to speak. She didn't need it. My son died believing this country would protect the innocent, she said. That day, I watched a general be treated like a suspect for standing still and speaking calmly. She turned toward Officer Vance. You didn't just disrespect her, she said. You disrespected the oath my son kept until his last breath. Even the defense did not object. When closing arguments ended, the jury did not deliberate long. The verdict was clear. The liability unmistakable. The damages significant, but secondary to the ruling itself. The judge's voice was steady as he read the decision. This court finds that the defendants participated in a pattern of constitutional violations enabled by technology negligence and willful blindness. Officer Vance lowered his head. His public defender sat back slowly, understanding at last that his client had never been the architect, only the instrument. As the courtroom emptied, Maya remained seated for a moment, hands folded, eyes closed. Around her, families embraced quietly, not in triumph, but in relief. Justice had not been loud, but it had been exact. And for the first time, it had been shared. The headlines faded faster than anyone expected. By the time the Sterling Act reached the floor of Congress, the cameras were already chasing something else. That was fine with General Maya Sterling. Change, she had learned, rarely arrived with applause. It arrived with paperwork late nights, and people willing to stay long after the room emptied. The bill was precise, narrow in language, unforgiving in intent. No federal, state, or municipal law enforcement agency would be permitted to deploy foreign-sourced policing technology without full transparency, independent auditing, and constitutional safeguards. No predictive system could be used to justify detention, seizure, or escalation without human accountability attached to every decision. It passed because it was impossible to argue against without admitting too much. When the vote was certified, Maya watched from a small office off the corridor, not the gallery. She did not raise her fist. She did not smile. She closed her eyes briefly, then returned to her notes. The cost arrived quietly. An international advisory role she had been considered for was withdrawn without explanation. Invitations slowed. Security protocols changed. Her home in Buckhead gained cameras that never slept guards who rotated in silence, a life measured now in risk assessments instead of convenience. A junior officer once asked if it bothered her. Maya answered honestly, "Liberty always sends the bill later." Weeks later, she visited the federal correctional facility where Officer Derek Vance was being held. There were no reporters, no announcement, just a narrow room divided by thick glass and a phone mounted to the wall. Vance entered from the other side wearing a neutral uniform that stripped away every symbol he had once relied on. He looked smaller, not diminished, exposed. Maya picked up the phone first. "I didn't think you'd come," Vance said. "I didn't come for you," she replied. Silence stretched between them. "I followed the rules," he said finally. "That's what they taught us." "Yes," Maya said, "and no one taught you when to stop." Vance swallowed. "They say I was a pawn." "They're right," Maya said, "but pawns still move." He looked up at her, then eyes rimmed with something close to shame. "Do you think any of this would have happened if you weren't who you are?" Maya didn't answer immediately. She had learned not to rush the truth. "No," she said at last. "That's the point." Afterward, she walked through another wing of the facility. Men stood as she passed, not out of fear, but recognition. Some nodded. Some looked away. One spoke. "They took my house," he said simply. "Nobody listened until you showed up." Maya met his eyes. "I didn't show up," she said. "I was already there. So were you." Outside, the air felt lighter than it had in months. The exonerations began slowly, then all at once. Cases reopened, records corrected, funds returned where they could be. Not every wound healed, not every loss restored. But the silence broke, and that mattered. On a Sunday morning not long after Maya returned to her garden, the marigolds had withered during the week she'd been gone. She knelt in the soil gloves on hands steady. The same patch where she had once stood handcuffed now held fresh earth. A neighbor approached cautiously, then closer. "I wanted to say, I didn't know," the woman said. Maya looked up. "Now you do." They stood together for a moment, the city moving quietly beyond the hedges. Later, Maya placed a tablet on the garden table and connected a call. Faces appeared, some familiar, some new. Gold Star families, the same ones who had witnessed the beginning of it all. This time, Maya said there will be no interruption. They spoke of service, of memory, of what it meant to be seen. As the call ended, Maya sat alone among the flowers. The house behind her was quiet. The street beyond it unchanged. And yet everything was different. She thought of the question she had never answered out loud. What if she hadn't been a general? What if there had been no convoy, no federal authority, no power that demanded recognition? The answer was already written in the stories of the 50 families who had stood beside her in court. She pressed the soil around the new seedlings firm, but gentle. Power, she knew now, was not the ability to command attention. It was the responsibility to ensure no one else needed a uniform to be treated with dignity. The garden caught the afternoon light. The marigolds stood straight. And the legacy took root not in headlines or laws alone, but in the quiet expectation that the standard had been raised and would not be lowered again. The story of General Maya Sterling does not end on a front porch in a courtroom, or even with the passage of a federal law. It ends in a far more difficult place, the conscience of a nation that was forced, however briefly, to look at itself without filters. What began as a routine act of gardening in a quiet Buckhead neighborhood became a mirror held up to American power. Not the kind of power celebrated in speeches or campaign ads, but the everyday power that decides who is questioned, who is believed, who is restrained, and who is protected. Maya Sterling did not seek that confrontation. She did not provoke it. She simply existed calmly and confidently in a space where someone decided she did not belong. That decision set everything in motion. When Officer Derek Vance chose to interpret composure as defiance and knowledge as talking back, he was not acting alone. He was operating inside a system that had taught him something dangerous, that authority does not need justification, only compliance. The handcuffs on Maya's wrists were not just metal. They were symbols of how easily dignity can be stripped when power goes unquestioned. The arrival of the convoy did not magically fix that injustice. It exposed it. The black SUVs, the federal agents, the sudden shift in tone did not create morality. They revealed its absence. The same actions that were dismissed moments earlier became unacceptable only when the world learned who Maya Sterling was. That contrast was the point. It forced a question that no amount of spin could erase. What happens when there is no convoy? Maya understood that question better than anyone. That is why she did not leave. That is why she did not shout, threaten, or demand personal retribution. Instead, she stayed and turned the lens outward. What she uncovered was not a few bad decisions, but a digital machine designed to extract value from vulnerability. A system that used technology to automate suspicion, convert presence into profit, and disguise exploitation as efficiency. The courtroom did not merely assign blame. It gave voice to people who had been erased by spreadsheets and algorithms. Families who lost homes without charges. Students whose futures were seized as evidence. Veterans who served their country only to be flagged as risks in their own neighborhoods. Their stories made clear what data alone never could. Injustice is not abstract. It is lived daily and often silently. Maya's role in that room was not to dominate, but to translate. She did not speak as a general. She spoke as a citizen who refused to let complexity excuse cruelty. When she explained how biased systems learn and escalate, she made something invisible painfully clear. When we outsource judgment to systems without accountability, we don't eliminate bias, we multiply it. The passage of the Sterling Act marked a turning point, but not a victory lap. Laws can close doors, but they cannot open eyes on their own. Maya paid a price for pushing that change forward. Opportunities disappeared. Security tightened. The ease of anonymity was gone forever. She accepted that cost because she understood a hard truth. Most people avoid real reform, always inconveniences those who benefit from the status quo, including those who fight for it. Her visit to the prison was not about forgiveness or absolution. It was about clarity. Officer Vance was not a monster, but he was not innocent either. He was a man shaped by a system that rewarded aggression and punished restraint, and he chose to move the way that system encouraged him to move, acknowledging that complexity did not excuse his actions. It made them more dangerous and more instructive. In the end, Maya returned to her garden, not because the story needed symmetry, but because restoration matters. The marigolds did not grow back on their own. They had to be replanted, tended, protected. Change works the same way. It is not sustained by outrage alone, but by quiet, consistent effort long after the cameras leave. So what is the lesson of this story? It is not that power will save you. Maya Sterling was saved by power, but only because she already had it. The deeper lesson is that dignity should never be conditional. It should not depend on rank, wealth, education, or visibility. A society that only corrects itself when the wrong person is harmed is not just unjust, it is unstable. This story challenges us to examine how we respond when we witness authority overreach in our own lives. Do we look away because it doesn't involve us? Do we assume the person being questioned must have done something wrong? Or do we pause long enough to ask whether the rules are being applied fairly consistently and humanely? It also asks us to be more critical of the systems we accept as neutral. Technology is not objective simply because it is automated. Policies are not fair simply because they are legal. Progress requires scrutiny, and scrutiny requires courage from citizens, from leaders, and from communities willing to believe people who say something isn't right. Applying this lesson does not require a uniform or a convoy. It starts smaller. Speaking up when someone is dismissed for their tone instead of their words. Questioning processes that punish without explanation. Teaching our children that respect does not mean silence in the face of injustice. Demanding transparency from institutions that serve us with our consent, not our submission. And perhaps most importantly, it requires remembering the unanswered question at the heart of this story. What happens when the person in handcuffs doesn't have a title anyone recognizes? If that question makes you uncomfortable, it should. Discomfort is often the first step toward change. If this story moved, challenged you, or made you see familiar systems in a new way, then you already understand why we tell stories like this. Not to divide, but to illuminate. Not to accuse, but to awaken. If you want more stories that go deeper than headlines, that explore power, dignity, and transformation with honesty and nuance, we invite you to support this channel. Subscribe, share, and stay with us. Your support gives us the motivation to keep creating thoughtful, meaningful content that doesn't shy away from hard truths. Because the next story is already waiting. And like this one, it matters who chooses to listen.